morning, everybody. It's good to see everyone. Welcome to Lewisville. If we've never met, my name is Matt, and glad to have you here. If you are new, first timer, maybe would love the chance to meet you after the service and help you in any way we can, get you pointed in the right direction. If you're looking for any info, just let us know. Also wanted to say thanks to everyone for the birthday wishes. My birthday on Friday, I turned 50, and what I've noticed in this is that people who are over 50 are the first to want to say welcome to the club. I think maybe I'm making them feel a little bit better. Not sure what that is. Lots of different texts and messages, and ranging from conversations on seniors discounts at Shoppers Drug Mart to the whole host. So anyways, thank you for saying happy birthday. And I actually fell in the parking lot this morning. So I'm just glad I'm 50, maybe not 70, because maybe I'd be dealing with a hip issue today. So I'm just like, man, it's getting old. It's rough work here. So, but glad to have you here today. Excited for the conversation we're going to have today as we're looking forward to 2026 and some of the things we sense God's kind of stirring and leading us and inviting us into. Have you ever thought to yourself, what am I supposed to do with my life? Not related to me turning 50, like it's not midlife crisis, but ever in your life have you ever thought, what am I supposed to do with my life? I remember the first time I had that question was in grade 13, back when there used to be was there grade 13 in New Brunswick as well? Oh, so in Ontario for a while we did have grade 13. It was called OAC, Ontario Academic Credits, and it was to prepare you for university. And I remember the first time I asked, what am I supposed to do with my life was right at the beginning of grade 13 because everyone was getting ready to apply to universities and colleges. And I had no idea what I wanted to do or what I was supposed to do. And some of my friends were like locked in on where they were going and what they wanted to do. And I just had no clue. And so our guidance department offered this kind of career aptitude test that you could do. I'm not sure if you've ever done one of those where you answer a whole bunch of questions. And at the end, you meet with the guidance counselor and they are going to give you maybe some ideas on the way you answer the questions on where what might be a good fit for you in terms of school, direction, or career path. I don't really remember the whole thing. I just remember the two careers that came out at the end of it was teaching or to be a funeral home director. And I'm either going to teach them when they're young or bury them when they're old. Once they're dead and they're old. But I was like, that was no help and just always felt like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. And that has kind of continued with me in different iterations over the years. I remember the next version of it was, what is God's will for my life? So not just what am I supposed to do with my life, but when I became serious about following Jesus, I was like, well, what is God's will for my life? And I remember there was times where I felt a lot of pressure on having to get it exactly right. Because I was thinking, and I grew up in an environment, and my feeling was, what if I get the wrong or make the wrong choice? What if I head down the wrong path? What if I think God is leading me this way and then I get it wrong and then all of a sudden I'm way off where I'm not supposed to be? And I felt this huge amount of pressure. And then I read this book. It's called Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby. Some of you may know of it. And it was something that really helped shape my understanding and my learning. And one of the key takeaways from his writing and that whole theme of the book, you could kind of sum it up like this. Watch and see where God is working and join him there. Watch and see where God is working and join him there. And I felt like that took a lot of pressure. It took the pressure of just staring inside and trying to discern and figure it all out, and what if I get it wrong, to simply saying, instead of looking inside, what if we just look out and notice and pay attention to what God's doing, and what if I just join him there? In his book, that same book, he writes this, Blackaby writes this. He says, God is always at work around you. When God reveals to you where he is working, that becomes your invitation to join him. Isn't that interesting? When God reveals to you where he is working, that becomes your invitation to join him. And that book, that idea has always stuck with me since I first read that. I think I was maybe 19 or 20 when I read that book. And I want to ask you, do you think that same theme, that same essence of what Blackaby's talking about can be extended beyond just an individual to a whole community of people? Say a spiritual community of people, say a church like Lewisville. Do you think we can extend and kind of continue on that idea to say, hey, as we pay attention to where God is at work, as we notice what he's up to around us, can we consider that then our invitation to join him? And I would say I think we can. I think when we see what God is up to, when he's working and accomplishing themes and rhythms of his kingdom, I think that is an invitation for us to join him. I think a key part of any church discerning where we're supposed to go is simply to slow down enough to pay attention to how God has been at work in our community before, themes we're understanding, where we notice him at work, and recognize what he's doing in our current moment and say, maybe this can help us then figure out where we're supposed to go. And so over the next little bit, what we want to do is just present a few ideas on where we sense God leading and inviting us to join him in the coming year. It doesn't mean we have it perfect. It doesn't mean it's a long-term vision or strategy. It's for the next year. We sense these are areas of invitation and areas of opportunity for us as a church. And so I want to walk you through those. But first I want to set it up with this really, for some of you, familiar passage, but this really key text from John chapter 5. So if you have your Bibles, turn to John chapter 5. We're going to be using that and rooting our idea of this joining God in his work from that. The QR code's up there if you want to follow along with your phone and jump into that. There's also some Bibles at the back if you don't have one. We would love to give you one or at least let you use one for this morning. But John chapter 5 is where we're going to hang out. I also, while everyone's getting ready set up, I also want to give you a little update on finances. You'll know that at the beginning of December, we were talking about Christmas giving and offering and a push forward in that direction, letting you know kind of how our year end was ending. And at that point, through letters and Sunday communication, we were letting our community know that we were projecting and on track to end 2025 with about a $35,000 shortfall, spending to giving, actual. And so, that's a big number. And we just said to you and to our community, and we said, hey, can we just pray about this together? And is there something that you might be able to do, recognizing that not everyone can participate in above and beyond kind of way? But we just said, can we pray together? And so we were culminating that on December 21st, which was our last Sunday, prior to Christmas Eve, and people participated and were giving. And so Elaine has done a great job behind the scenes kind of getting all that sorted out. So again, our projected shortfall was $35,000. So just to give you an update now on, there may be a slight number of few little expenses that still have to be sorted out, but where we land right now, our revenue, our giving, your giving, our collective giving, 502-810-85. And then our expenses, $493,624. And so we actually end the year with a surplus just over $9,000. Isn't that amazing? So I think it's incredible. I was praying and hoping, what would it look like for us to end even at zeros? I thought if we could make up that $35,000, I felt like that would be an incredible thing. And so when Elaine did the work and we were kind of going through the numbers and we found out we were actually above, it felt like an incredible, humbling victory. It felt like something that we need to just acknowledge and give thanks to you and to God for. I know there are about 40 different giving units, individuals, couples, families, who participated in an above and beyond kind of way. I know that not everyone is able to participate above and beyond, and some are even just in the beginning stages of considering what giving looks like. But across the whole spectrum, to know that we made up that shortfall and land in a positive place just, again, feels so encouraging. What an encouraging way to end the year, and what an incredible way to start together. And so just on behalf of the team here, leaders, staff, everyone, just a huge thank you to you. Thank you to those who are sacrificial and radically generous in your giving. It's incredible. I think this is the first time I've ever given a finance update and it's been positive. So that's also pretty cool. But would you just join me in just praying and acknowledging this moment? God, we recognize that everything we have is from you. And you entrust us to steward it wisely, both in our own families and households, our finances, but also in our collective giving here in the church and what we do with it and how we participate in our city and in your kingdom. And so, God, we just stop now to give thanks for your provision, for your faithfulness, for the ways that you show up. And not just this year when we end well, but also in years when we've been behind, that you continue to show up. And God, we know that you are always at work. And so in this moment, as we have closed out 2025 in a positive way, God, thank you for the families, the women and men, the individuals who've participated in this way. Thanks for everyone who is a financial giving partner here at the church, who believes in what we're doing together and what we can accomplish together, and our call, the call you have on us as a local community here for almost 200 years in this part of our city. And so, God, we give thanks for your goodness and your faithfulness and your provision, and we honor you with this update and where you're calling us in the year ahead. Amen. Okay, let me read from John chapter 5. Let me just set it up, because we're not gonna have time to read the whole passage, but let me just set it up for you, just to make sure we're all kind of up to speed and we know the story. So this is a story where Jesus has come into Jerusalem, and he's there for a festival feast. And there's this pool called the Pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem. It's still there. The ancient ruins are still there that you can check out. And what it did is it became a place where people who were struggling with physical ailments, disabilities, and things like that would hang out there, because their belief is that when God would stir the water, or an angel would stir the water, that the first person who was able to get into those waters would be healed. That's the premise. And so Jesus is visiting this Pool of Bethesda, and he comes across this man who has for 38 years been struggling with a condition, a debilitating condition. And he says to this man, "Do you want to get well?" Which feels like a kind of almost a silly question. Of course, wouldn't you think? Of course. But Jesus asked him, "Do you want to get well?" And the man notes that no one's here to help me into the pool when the waters are stirred. And then Jesus simply just says, get up, take your mat, and walk. And so the man gets up. He's able to walk. He's able to move. And this kind of sparks and catches the attention of the religious leaders, because Jesus heals him on the Sabbath. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But he's healed, and he's carrying his mat on the Sabbath. And they say to him, "Who's healed you?" And he doesn't know who Jesus is. He doesn't know the one who's given him this instruction and healed him. And so he says he doesn't know. And then later on, Jesus meets this man again in the temple, and the man becomes aware of who Jesus is. And he later tells the authorities, the religious leaders, who Jesus is. And so that's the kind of the setting and context to where we pick this up in verse 16, where Jesus now is being confronted by the religious leaders, and this is his response. This is how he speaks back to them. So let me just read from verse 16 on. It says this: "So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him." Verse 17, "In his defense, Jesus said to them, 'My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working.' For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God." Jesus gave them this answer: "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does." So there's a couple things happening here that are adding tension. So this idea of Sabbath was a sacred day of rest for the people. It began kind of in the creation account and order, where God would take time to rest. And Sabbath, if you know, is one of the 10 Commandments. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. And what developed over the years is this whole detailed and extravagant understanding of what the Sabbath was and what it meant to cease from work on those days. And so there was this whole group running list of what was considered work, so what you couldn't do on the Sabbath, and then what was permissible. And still to this day, for those who are Jewish and observe, particularly Orthodox Jews, there's many things they can and won't do on Sabbath. And so carrying your mat was considered work. And so that's the thing that gets the leader's attention, is this man is walking, carrying his mat, considered work according to their understanding of Sabbath rules. Also, Jesus healing, that act of healing would also have been considered work. So two things are like really getting the attention and the ire of the religious establishment. And then you add to it the way Jesus responds when he's defending himself in verse 17. Right? Let me just read that again. In verse 17, when he says, in his defense, Jesus said, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." So this connection that Jesus is drawing to the work, the way God is always at work, and building the sense of relationship and intimacy, my Father, is like another thing that prompts them, as we read, to want to attack and persecute him, and ultimately they want to try to kill him and remove him. This blasphemous, not only is he breaking Sabbath, but he's connecting himself in this relationship. Who are you? How dare you say these things? And so Jesus is defending himself, because Jesus says, and is feeling like the extension of God's compassion and love doesn't take a day off. It continues on. And if God is about these things, then Jesus too is about these things. The things that define what it means to be in relationship and to extend the kingdom of God are the things that Jesus is about during his ministry. N.T. Wright, talking about this scene, says this: Jesus insists that he is not working independently of the Father. What he sees the Father doing is what he's doing as well. So that phrase there, always at work, is an interesting one. Always at work. Jesus is painting this picture then of God's continuous ongoing activity. Not a hit and miss, but that God is currently and always at work around us, whether we see it or not, whether we want to pay attention or acknowledge it or not. God is always at work. And Jesus is saying, I'm joining God in the work that he is doing, challenging the assumptions of the establishment, demonstrating this idea of total dependence and paying attention. There's almost this development of this theology of attentiveness, that if you have eyes to see and a willingness to see, you too will see how God is always at work. And implied in this is that we aren't the ones who initiate kingdom activity. We aren't the ones who dream up what it means to do God's work. It's not a great strategy session. It's not whatever we can kind of dream up. That's not how it works. How it's supposed to work for us as we follow is to recognize the work God is already doing and to join him in the things he is up to pay attention to those things. Remember when Henry Blackaby says, God is always at work around you. When God reveals to you where he's working, that becomes your invitation to join him. So Jesus is showing us not only this challenge, but also this opportunity that's in front of us. And it's been this way for the collective church community, the followers of Jesus throughout history, is to try to do our best to discern and to see where God is at work and to join him there. Of course, we add our gifts and our talents and our skills and our discernment into the mix. But it takes the pressure off. What am I going to do with my life? Or what is God's will for my life? Or what is God's will for our church? Or where is God leading us? When we say, part of that discernment is to say, God, what are you doing and what are you inviting us up to? We don't have to start from zero. There's already this pattern that's around us. We just need to have eyes to see it. We need to pay attention. We need to look, notice, and participate in God's mission. So in order to look, notice, and participate, some things that stand out for me is this idea that we have to be willing to slow down enough, to look around enough, to recognize that what we may be trying to figure out is not something we in and of ourselves kind of conjure up or stir up or dream up. We need to look, to prayerfully discern, to pay attention. And from that posture of slowing down, to be able to then, with kind of spiritual vision, to discover and see the ways the kingdom of God is breaking out all around us. To see God's activity in our work, in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our city, in our region, all those kinds of things. To be able to view it through a different lens. God, where are you at work? How do we notice and pay attention to that? And then always the thing is, then are you willing to get involved? Are you willing to participate? Are you willing to be active in this? The idea of work, that word work in verse 17, comes from the word that can be translated as to labor or to perform, to engage in activity, or note this, to bring about God's purpose. So when we talk about, I've always been about my Father's work, or we want to join God in his work, the idea of work in this context is to bring about God's purpose. So as we look, as we notice what God is doing, as we have boldness and courage to participate in it, we are joining God in his redemptive work to bring about his purposes, to join him in that way. We could say it this way: our calling as followers of Jesus is not to invent our own ways to serve God, but to look, notice, and participate in his ongoing activity in the world. So let's talk about this coming year. January is always a great time for us to just kind of look ahead a little bit. So what will this look like? What could this look like for us in the coming year? So many of you will know that over the last year we've done some work in different kind of configurations of staff and leaders and teams, doing some discernment work, looking back on our history as a church. Where have we seen God at work, looking for themes and celebrating God's work and pattern and faithfulness, and kind of going through some of those exercises together was like really encouraging and incredible. Also, we had times to be able to say, hey, here's some things we can celebrate where it was very clear we were joining in what God was doing, but also to acknowledge there was some painful history in our church, some difficult seasons and times, and it's okay to acknowledge that being part of our story as well. And then in different ways to say, well, how does our history and our past, how does our view of where God has been at work and is at work, how can then that shape where God may be leading us in the future? And admittedly, on a personal level, I was hoping that as we were working through all that we would come out the other end together with this real clear sense of this unified vision or call for like, hey, the next 3 to 5 years, here's where we're going to go. Like, admittedly, I was hoping and praying like that we'll have this together as a leadership, like this sense of here's where we're all pulling together. This is where we need to go. That has not happened. It's not that good things haven't happened and been going on. It's not that we didn't pray and take time. It's just that we haven't, or let me just say this, at this point, as of yet, I don't think we're at this sense of this greater long-term trajectory. But that doesn't mean that there's still not things to celebrate and work for us to participate in. There's still not opportunity. Of course there is. There's opportunity for us. And so what I'd love to share is just some things, these ideas that I think have been stirring that I think are invitations for us to participate in the coming year. I think nothing's brand new. I think they're things that build on who we have been, but also ways that we can develop and grow over the coming year. And I'm excited. I'm hopeful about how these things, these initiatives, this clarity will help give us focus for the coming year and keep changing us and transforming us as a church community. So let me walk us through this. We'll have more time over the coming seasons to talk more about it, but in a quick way, let me just talk through these. The first one is to spend time looking at our discipleship pathway. So that may be like a theme or an idea that's a little bit maybe new to you or different for you. But this is for us as a church to say, how are we from our very youngest person in our church to our very oldest person in our church? What is our sense of how we are shaping and discipling our people through all ages and stages? And you'll know that part of our culture code, we have it on the wall here, is to be pupils, and we'll have it here on the screen. So we know that apprenticeship and discipleship is a key part of who we've always been as a church, and one of our key leanings as a church, our jobs as a church is disciple people. So pupils, we follow the way of Jesus together, and our guiding principle will be this: we are apprentices of Jesus together. From every age and stage of life, we spur one another on to deeper connection and relationship with Jesus, striving to align our lives with his example and teaching. We look for the ancient past to see where the good way lies, that we may walk in it together. And definitely, good things are happening across all of our groups, from Kidsville, the youngest kids in Kidsville, all the way up through to our gold timers. There are good discipleship initiatives and activities and relationships happening, no doubt. But sometimes what's cool is when you have a moment, I think there's an opportunity to slow down and to take a look and to notice and to say, is everything that we have been doing what we want to continue to do? It's a chance to evaluate and to look at things again. And I think that is a healthy practice. So for instance, are things that are happening, say within Kidsville, the way they're approaching it, the curriculum we're using, the language we're using, how we're raising up our kids, is that consistent then as kids grow up and move through the different stages into our youth group? And then are there any gaps that emerge? Like what happens after youth? Like when high school students or young adults, like is that a gap where maybe things fall off? Or how about our adult discipleship and opportunities? And to look at the whole piece and say, God, how are we being really intentional? And I think that's the key idea, is our intentionality on raising up people as apprentices of Jesus. What does that look like for us? And just to be honest on the ways that it's working, which it definitely is, but are there ways that we can fan that deeper into flame and to put energy and resources behind it? Or maybe there's some gaps that we're noticing as we stare into it to say, maybe we assume certain things are happening, but when we take a moment to look at it, maybe there's like, oh wait, we are assuming that's happening, but maybe it's not. Maybe there's room for us to develop and to grow in that way. Some key questions we may want to ask ourselves are, what practices and postures and patterns are we hoping to see formed? What should be noticeable from someone who's been a part of our community for a year? How are they growing as an apprentice after they've been here for 1 year or 5 years or 10? How are we shaping and forming them? How is God transforming them and changing them? How does that look? What does the consistency look like? Are there rhythms that should be present, obviously in different ways at different ages and stages, but what are the non-negotiables, the essential things around prayer and understanding Scripture and life with Jesus? How are we kind of seeding those and teaching those all the way through? What does that look like? Are we just dispensing information, or are we giving people opportunity to put those things into practice? Like any kind of apprenticeship, if you think about it in that term. vocationally? Are we apprenticing and giving chances for people? And so that is one of the things we're going to be working on, and I'm excited about over the coming year, the idea of having clarity and increased unity and a sense of desire of moving our people into maturity in Jesus. We're never fully there, but wait a second, this is a great opportunity for us to stare that down and say, how can we do this better and continue to disciple and shape people as apprentices of Jesus? So on that note, if there are certain kinds of people who love those kinds of big projects, maybe you write curriculum, maybe you're teachers, maybe you're project managers, maybe you've done some kind of this kind of work in your own field in a different way, can you let us know if this kind of thing is something that you would be interested in helping us take a look at? Because we need people to help us form and shape this. And at the end of this, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to say across all of our ages and stages, across all that we do, here's how we are intentionally setting ourselves up to shape. Not assuming that you show up on Sunday, you get everything. Of course not. So what does it look like for us to be this full, robust, wholesome community that is shaping and growing disciples? So please let us know if you'd like to jump in with that. I think it's kind of going to be a big project behind the scenes, but something that at the end of it, I think will have great fruit for us. The second one is establishing and cultivating a culture of prayer in our church. Don't get too far ahead of me, okay? But let me just walk you through what I mean when I say this. So if we define what is a culture of prayer, this is how I would articulate it. It's where talking and listening to God is natural, frequent, and woven into every part of church life. It's not to say we aren't a praying church. We are. But what does it look like that for everyone who calls Lewisville home and a follower of Jesus, from staff to leaders to elders to all of our kids and youth, for us all to see equally that prayer is essential. It's not something we add into our discipleship. It's not just this extra piece, but is a core essential of who we are. Everything flows from this posture. It's the foundation that forms and shapes us as a church community, as individual followers of Jesus, and everything we do together. Defining our decisions, shaping our relationships, what it means to be in life together with God. Again, it's not that we're not a praying church. We are. We see prayer happening in different ways. We have prayer teams. On Sundays, we have people ready to pray with folks every Sunday after services. We also have a group that is not here on Sunday, but through text. I'm on the text stream, and we're always sharing prayer requests as we become aware of them. People are praying behind the scenes. We know we pray in our small groups and with our kids and with our youth, and we do pray. We have a monthly prayer meeting. There's lots of different ways that we pray, but I think there's an opportunity here to build on who we already are, to go deeper in this direction. Daniel Henderson, in his book, Old Paths, New Power, he describes it this way. He says, what oxygen is to the lungs, such is prayer to the soul. Prayer is the air of the church. So across all of our ages and stages, how do we start leaning in, or continue to lean into this idea of establishing a culture of prayer? And I think this is something that's not new. I think over the last 2 years, this has been this running thing that I've heard from a number of different people, whether it's over coffee or a passing comment. Sometimes you hear someone say something and it feels like a one-off, but then over time, if you hear it in a number of different times from a number of different people in different ways, you start paying attention to the theme that emerges. And a number of people have talked about this idea of growing deeper in this kind of dependence and connection with God, this two-way conversation of relying on God. And so to me, it feels like it's moved from kind of an idea that a few people have kind of tossed into conversations. It's become common enough that it feels like it's this opportunity, this invitation of God to join him. And to not do it feels like it would just be wrong. It feels like it's stirring enough in us, and there's this opportunity to move in that way. And so practically speaking, a few things we want to do to start 2026. So beginning next week, we are doing a teaching series all on prayer. It's called Shaped, and that begins next week, and that will take us all the way up into Easter. And we're going to just intentionally spend time talking about what prayer is and what it isn't. What does it mean to be a praying church? What does it mean to be shaped by prayer? What does reliance and connection to God look like? I think this is one of those things that sometimes we just assume and take for granted, particularly if we've grown up in the church, on what prayer should look like and how it functions. But it's a good chance, I think, good opportunity for us to get back to the basics on this and to really dig into it. what does this mean? And so that will be the way we're kicking off teaching over the coming weeks as we begin this year. And as part of that, we'll be looking to create more intentional times and opportunities for you, for our whole community to engage in prayer, different kinds of prayers, different ways of connecting. And so we'll be letting you know over the coming weeks ways to practically put some of the things we're talking about into practice and to exercise them and to treat them like a spiritual discipline and to work on them. Because that's what it is. It's not something you just fall into and achieve. It's something that requires this ongoing commitment like any relationship does. And so please stay tuned. For those of you who are really passionate about this, if you want to talk with us and help us shape some of these things over the coming months, opportunities for people to engage in prayer, prayer rooms, prayer meetings, concerts of prayer, prayer guides, any of those things, if that is something that you are passionate about, please let me know. And we have work that we're already doing on the teaching series, but there's lots of room to jump in and be a part of this. And I would encourage you to take advantage of not only the teaching series, but where we go with it, and to view it as something that just might change the way you understand and the way you are connected to Jesus. And so excited about that. And then one last one, I want to talk about what local and global engagement look like. Again, these are not new things, but again, I think they're things that we're already been around, and there's just ways that we can keep moving in this direction. So first, let's talk about local engagement. So there are so many ways and things that we could be about. There's so many needs in our city. This church historically has been involved in all kinds of different things in this neighborhood and in our city. Amazing things. But sometimes it can feel, maybe you're like me, it feels almost overwhelming. There's so much need around us. Where do you even get started? And sometimes just naming something can give a bit of focus and intentionality. It doesn't mean we ignore everything else, but having a bit of focus can help us. And I would say I feel like one of those easy ways for us to continue to build on what we're learning and to continue to grow in that direction all has to do around the idea of food insecurity in our city. So if you don't know what food insecurity is, this is how it is defined by StatsCan and Health Canada. It says food insecurity is the inadequate or insecure access of food due to financial constraints. This is not about food availability, not primarily about food availability. It's related to financial constraints for people. And so here, let me give you some stats on what's going on in our city and our province right now around this. So a household is considered insecure, food insecure, if any of these happen at any point in a year. Worry about running out of food or having money to buy more, compromising on the quality or variety of food that you're able to eat or feed your family, the need to skip meals or eating less than you want to or is needed because you don't have enough, or going whole days without eating. So those are markers that the government identifies as being the kind of the factors that would qualify someone to meet this idea of being food insecure. So in a recent survey, a snapshot around food insecurity, 30% of all people in New Brunswick are living in this category. It's most greatly impacting families with kids. Get this, 40% of kids under 17 are considered food insecure. 40% in our province. Food banks report that over 32,000 families visit each month, which is way up. And more people than ever are accessing food bank, and those who have jobs. This isn't about lack of desire to work. This is about not making enough to make ends meet. And so people are struggling. Now, there are so many needs around us, even we can't solve this, but what is the invitation around us? What might we be able to do with this over the coming year that feels like it's right in front of us? So I think a couple things stand right out to me. So our food pantry is small, but you know what's interesting about that is that it ebbs and flows the number of people who show up at our door, but it's this constant drip, drip, drip that we are helping people in our neighborhood who just show up in need. Our goal isn't to be a food bank. That's not what we're shooting for. We're saying, how do we have food here so that when they show up at our church, we're able to give them a meal so they can for sure eat tonight as a family and maybe enough for the next couple days until they can get other resources that is beyond our ability. So I think just developing, continuing with our food bank is an easy thing we have been doing, and it's right in our face as a way we continue to serve our neighbors and the people right around us, immediately around us. Most people just walk up to the door when they come. The second thing, I think, is how do we just be a bit more intentional with those who are already doing this work around food insecurity? Not needing to reinvent the wheel, but to partner with those who are already experts in doing this stuff. And this church has, over the years, partnered in different ways with Second Mile Food Bank. It's literally 400 meters that way, or this way, this general direction, 400 meters. It's right there. And we kind of, at Christmas, fell into it when they were looking for a place to do their Christmas food boxes. And some of you showed up and volunteered and were a part of that. And it was an unbelievable day just to see them doing their thing. And a bunch of us helped out, but it was their thing that we just allowed our space to be used for. But in getting to know their director, Chris, and having conversations with him, it's so apparent that right down the road, there's this group doing incredible work. And they could use some help, and they are been doing it for a long time, and it feels like it's sitting right in front of. We don't want to become another food bank. The food bank is 400 meters away. How do we see that as potentially as an opportunity to partner with them, to see how God is using them in our city to meet the needs of people who are experiencing food insecurity? What can that look like for us? Now, it doesn't mean that we don't do other things as a church, and you may have a certain passion area that you will want to continue. Great. But in terms of giving us some focus for the coming year, I think this is a thing that's right in front of us. It's kind of glaring and would be an easy way for us to jump in. And the thing about partnering and serving and participating that way is that the hidden benefit, not only are you helping others, but it changes us. As you follow Jesus and you extend yourself for the benefit of others, it actually reforms and shapes you. It changes us as we're participating with people in that way. And then, so on that one, if you want to help, all these areas, if you want to help us, we're looking for people to help us figure this out, to discern opportunities in our city, in our region, what engagement looks like, what participation, volunteering, opportunities, all those things. We need people to help shape us and help us figure that out. The last one I want to talk about is the global piece, which we have talked about a little bit back in the fall, but we're continuing in this direction. So Stephen and Adams, I'll invite you to come on up. So just making sure we're all on the same page, we had been looking at different ways we might be able to partner and participate globally. And CBM, Canadian Baptist Ministries, became an easy and quick way for us to say it makes sense for us to partner with them. And so we began looking at different countries, different regions, on ways we may be able to work through the history and the partnerships that CBM already has, but what's the invitation kind of through their work and their network and connections on a global level. And so back in October, I guess it was, we had Byron Velasquez, who's the national director of CBM's work in Guatemala, and we talked about the opportunity and the invitation to join and to participate as a step partner with CBM, specifically focusing in Guatemala. And so when Byron was here, we got to hear a little bit about who he was and their work there and the opportunities there. I would say it's a bit of an untapped area in CBM's work. It's kind of a newer region and country of focus. And they're looking for churches to join and participate that way in a mutually shaping, learning way. We're not going there to save them. We're going there to partner and to learn and to build relationship and support what God is doing there, certainly. And so that was awesome in October. And then in November, Adams and Stephen went down to Guatemala for a quick whirlwind trip representing our church to begin the process of building relationships, not only spending more time with Byron, but also meeting with other national leaders and some projects and partners that were there. And so this, I guess, our first chance to hear a little bit about what you experienced and why we feel like, hopefully you feel like this is a good direction for us. So first off, just give us, I guess I'll come up here. Give us just first impressions. Like, what was that like for you guys to be there as we're discerning as part of our leadership and church in terms of engagement, participation with Byron and the national church and the partners that are looking for support and partnership there?
Yeah, so hello.
Whoa, you're supposed to sing with that amount of reverb.
Sir. There we go. To give you guys some context, I feel like I'm still, there we go. Yeah. To give you guys some context, Steve and I were down basically spending the whole time with Byron as he was like showing us kind of everything that Matt was just talking about, like seeing what God is already doing. So he was showing us these snapshots. And it's one thing for us, like, you know, when Byron came, if you guys can remember, like the dude was freezing. He was up here, like, and so it's like we only get a quick moment to kind of get a sense of who he is. And I think from us as a leadership, like, we knew partnering with CBM was an easy win. But then it's another thing when you actually meet the person who's going to be the point person. And let me tell you guys, Byron is quite the dude. Stephen does a great impression of him. We'll save that for later. But we just had a blast with him. Like, there's something about when you meet someone, and I'm sure you've all experienced this before, where you're just like, oh, like we sync. Like we're connecting in on the same level when it comes to even theologically how we think, even how we think about mission. And I'll tell you, it challenged us a lot. Like, it challenged us in our thinking on, like, okay, what does this actually look like? And the other thing too is, like, he's just a super funny guy. Guatemala is a hospitality culture, so literally everywhere we went, they're like either giving us food or giving us coffee. They're big into coffee down there. And I don't know if you know this about Stephen, but Stephen doesn't drink coffee. Now, the first time, Stephen was a very polite young man, right? He was like, I will take the coffee. But then eventually he was like, I can't do this anymore. So Byron thought this was hilarious. So Byron starts introducing Stephen as the Mormon. Which Stephen and I are like, this is a little uncomfortable, but all of them just start losing it laughing. They're like, he's a Mormon. We're like, we don't know if he knows that he's not a Mormon. So, but it was just a really, really, like, just to say, like, culturally with working with Byron and sort of like understanding who he is and what he's all about, it was an easy, just like relational connection, certainly for both Stephen and I, but also like I could see the relationships and partnerships. There was many people we met down there because of the different teams that have traveled from Crandall. They would ask us, oh, do you know such and such? Do you know such and such? And we're like, oh yeah, we do know those people. And then all I could think about in my head was, oh, this will be so fantastic when we get to the point when they know us and we have that relational connection with them. And they're asking about, such and such in our church to have that connect. Yeah, that was just a quick 30,000 shot.
Yeah, so then tell us about some of the partners and projects that you did visit that, because part of it was to explore who are we going to be intentional with, what projects. So you were kind of checking out a whole bunch of things that might be good fits for us at church. So tell us about that and what you think is going to line up well for us.
Is mine hot? Okay. We brought some pictures just quickly to go through. Is there one right before that? Yes, so if you all remember the horse photo, this is the real photo. We were never on horses. Matt was fooled. That was an AI photo that Byron gave us that Adam sent to Matt. So that's the real photo. But okay, so the next one. So this is, so basically at the beginning of the week, we met with the kind of overarching, basically conventions, organizations of the churches, and then we went out and kind of visited the actual places. So this is one of the places. So this school, it doesn't look like it right now, but this school has 700 kids in the morning and 500 different kids in the afternoon. And there's us in the middle, so you can go to the next one. This is a couple giants with some small people. This is the church associated with that school. So down there, the church is very intentional about stepping into needs that would be different from us. So for example, like there's a lot of kids that fall back for their education. So partially because they only go half a day because they don't have enough space. So the church would teach math and English and things in the church spaces, or they had like 12 laptops, so they're trying to teach them computer skills and things like that. So this is the church associated with the school that we just saw. You can go to the next one. This is a school for pastors that they're trying to teach theology and kind of the more deeper stuff for teachers. This is one of those organizations, I don't remember which one this was, but this organization has just about 1,000 or just over 1,000 churches that are part of their convention. This is Adam's, this is the first church we visited. He was asked to do a little sermon, I guess. And the girl there is his translator, and she is 22 or something, but she's still what they consider a youth. So there was a group of youth at this church that we met with at coffee beforehand, 7 or 8 of them, who all very good at English, and they do kind of do the same thing. They have a room just off to the right through that wall that they teach English and math and extra things to the kids. Because right across the street from this church, there's a big apartment building behind this church, and it's all nice and whatever. And right across the street, there's this big wall, almost with like an alleyway door that they took us through. And you can't see it from the church, but through the wall, then it's immediate poverty. But you can't see it unless you actually look for it. So they are trying to literally connect across the street with these kids. If you remember Byron when he was here talking about the chicken church and the women that they get chickens, so this is one of the women with her chickens in the coop there that we visited. This is us holding some chickens. Same, different lady's house, same program. So we thought this was interesting because this is in the church that is associated with the ladies that get the chickens. So this is up basically on the stage, behind the stage, and we took Google Translate, and those posters there are actually teaching the women how to feed the chickens, when to feed them, how to give them water, how to take care of the eggs, to actually make it sustainable. Because in years past, with kind of this like idea of coming alongside and working with them, they would get donations of chickens or whatever, and then they would eat the eggs, kill the chicken, and it's done. So they're trying to. Everybody gets 14 chickens, and they force them to put a little money away so that in 1 year they sell the chickens and they can buy 14 new chickens. And so this is teaching them how to actually take care of the chickens, and then the next step is roosters. So this is probably the greatest example of the extreme poverty that we saw. This is a house that a husband and wife and a kid, or a teenager, I guess, live in. It is as bad as it looks. This is kind of similar, but this is one that actually has been, I think, is this the one that Crandall? Yeah, this is the one that Crandall has already helped, and I think there's a photo of behind the next photo. Oh, maybe I didn't put it in, or maybe they're in the wrong order. Oh, this one, yeah. So the wall on the right, Crandall, I think in the spring was there, and they rebuilt because her wall was the same on the right, except for it was actually literally collapsing. So that's just one example of kind of like what some project could look like, is this lady has already been helped, is continuing to be helped. But actually, an interesting thing about this is the pastor that we went with to see this lady, she doesn't go to his church, but he's the one helping her because her pastor has visited her house before it was fixed and basically just said, well, this isn't what we do. This isn't our problem. And so Adam's made the good point of like, I'm not sure what book you're reading. But anyways. And Adams loved to take photos of all the food he ate. So
Classic Adams.
Yeah, it doesn't look great, but it was very delicious. Those are two very Guatemalan dishes that Byron was very intent on us eating. But we also went to McDonald's one day, so it's not all that. I think that's all the photos.
Yeah, like really what you got to see there was a lot of what Matt was talking about, right? This idea of being aware of the need in the community. So that idea of the kids, like 700 kids in the morning, 500 different kids in the afternoon. And these children sometimes in their educational system, like the parents or typically just the mother will leave the decision to the child if they're going to go to school. And so very often, a kid will be by the age of like 10 just dropping out of school. And so the churches are saying, like, how can we help out and how can we step into that? The church that you saw me speaking at, what's interesting about that too is that all those youth don't actually live in that area of that church at all. They saw that as a mission field and said, we want to come down and we want to help in some way. And here's the part that I think gets like hard for us to wrap our minds around, is that I think typically when we think of mission, and I remember CBM talked about this, is we think, okay, well, what can we do to come bring down? And like, we're going to do this thing, we're going to take a photo, and then we're going to peace out. But that's not what really they're about at all. They're like, no, we want to learn from you, but we also want you to learn from us. And it was these youth actually said, the problem a lot for Guatemalans is a lot of them will just be sitting around saying, well, the missionaries are going to come eventually. And they're like, we don't want that. We want to be self-sustaining. We want to learn and be able to do these things where we can help our community, where we can participate with what God wants us to do in our community. So it was really like exciting, and I think there's a lot of opportunities for us, what that specifically looks like. And I think this will be the thing that for us as a congregation will be a bit of a like challenge, is like we can't say in this moment that when we go down, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z right in this moment. But as we partner with CBM and see what is happening in Guatemala at the time frame that we're going to be going down, then it'll start to make sense. So do we want to reveal that?
Yeah,
Matt?
sure, yeah.
Yeah. So we do have it on the calendar. So for next November, we're kind of saying right now it's going to be like mid-November, just because the flights and such will flex a bit. But that is when we are planning to send a trip down and send like a team from Lewisville down to partner with some of these churches, some of the denominations down there, to participate in what God is already up to down there. Yeah,
so stay tuned. There'll be an application, and we'll let you know. For anyone who's interested in becoming a part of that team or interested in joining that, we'll let you know how that all goes over the coming little bit.
Just be prepared. If you don't drink coffee, you know what they're going to call you. So,
you know what? I just want to thank you guys so much for sharing, and I'm sure many of you, that's the most you've ever heard Stephen talk. So that's also pretty. It's also pretty. We're going to be talking about these things more as we go. This is our first chance just to kind of share some thoughts for the year ahead, the invitation and the chance to join God. And again, if you are interested in any of these areas and you sense like resonance with it and you have gifting and skill that can help us, we need it. We need folks to join in and help us shape these things. But just want to pray to kind of wrap this up, and the conversation will continue, okay? So God, we just want to just mark this moment again and just recognize that as we are entering this new year, that we do sense that there are ways that we can see that you have been at work in and around our church, historically through our church, and also in the recent years through our church, that we want to pay attention to notice, and to, with intentionality, move forward in. And so when we think about discipleship and intentionality on what it means to grow as apprentices of Jesus, as we think about creating a culture of prayer, building on this culture of what it means to be dependent on you, God, to meet you in that way and to be shaped in that way. And then these opportunities to love both our neighborhood and our city, and to join what you're doing in a global way, focusing in the country of Guatemala. God, we are just really excited. It gives us focus and helps us with some clarity. But we also know that as we do these things, as we join you, that you continue to shape us through these initiatives and these activities. So God, we don't want to dream things up ourselves. We want to faithfully respond to the invitation to join you. And so God, we just ask for your leading over the coming months for the work we're going to be doing, believing that it's going to change us as a church and be good for not only for us, but for our city and for those we have the joy of interacting and serving. So God, for your glory, honor, lead us in the year ahead, and excited for the series and the focus on prayer that begins next week, God. We wait on you. Amen.